The story begins with a group of teenagers, Michael, Emma, Ethan, and Olivia, who decide to spend an evening at an old cemetery on the outskirts of their small town. A local legend tells that at night one can see ghosts here, and the townspeople advise staying away from this place after sunset. But for the teenagers, it seemed like a great opportunity to test their courage. Michael, the leader of the group, suggested a game. Everyone would split up and go to different corners of the cemetery to collect old coins from graves. Whoever finds the most coins in 10 minutes wins. Although Olivia thought this idea was dangerous, the others agreed. Each of them went their separate way, and soon the cemetery enveloped them in its dark depths. Only the light from their flashlights showed the path. Old leaves crunched underfoot. The wind whistled through the trees, creating eerie sounds. But the strangest thing was the feeling that someone was constantly watching them. After a few minutes, Ethan stopped at an old grave that seemed completely neglected. He bent down to pick up a coin, but at that moment felt a sharp chill on his shoulders. Turning around, he saw a woman in white standing a few meters away from him. Her face was covered by long strands of hair, but her eyes, black as coal, glowed in the darkness. He screamed and ran back to the meeting place, but the sound of his scream melted away in the cemetery's silence. Emma, who was not far from Ethan, also sensed something. Her flashlight began to flicker, and in the light, she saw something moving between the graves. It was a small black creature with shiny eyes. It moved quickly and strangely, approaching her. Frightened, she bolted and ran as well. Olivia and Michael, who had gathered near an old oak tree, couldn't understand why their friends were delayed. But soon they heard footsteps quickly approaching. It was Ethan and Emma, both terrified and confused. They started telling what they had seen when suddenly Michael noticed a figure in white standing a few meters away from them. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't. His body was numb with fear. The ghost was getting closer, and suddenly other shadows appeared around them. These were old souls who couldn't find peace and now haunted anyone who disturbed their rest. A feeling of hopelessness overwhelmed the teenagers. They started running towards the cemetery exit, but the faster they ran, the more it seemed like they were wandering in a maze of shadows. After a few minutes of futile attempts to find an exit, they came upon an old church, half ruined and covered with moss. The door was ajar, and inside, surprisingly, they found a candle burning on the altar. Without hesitation, they entered, hoping to find salvation. But as soon as they crossed the threshold, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. From the darkness of the church, shadows began to appear, surrounding the teenagers. The cold breath of death engulfed them. Only now did they realize that this night at the cemetery was not a game, but a deadly trap. As the shadows approached, one of them spoke, its voice a whisper of 1,000 souls. "You disturbed our peace. Now you will stay with us forever." The candlelight went out, and silence filled the old church. The next morning, the townspeople discovered that the cemetery was once again shrouded in thick fog, and on the ground lay 4 old coins, the only trace of the teenagers who dared to play at the cemetery. This was the last anyone heard of them. Since then, no one has dared to play in that cemetery after sunset.